So as we get started today, the topic is mass market channels, right? It's something that in Jason Beck's opinion is one of the most powerful channels that we have is the person-to-person interaction within our industry. Now, whether that's commercial or small commercial or even residential, that face-to-face aspect, obviously with mass markets, it's just a way bigger number, right? That's how our industry is touching the constituents that may or may not be complaining to the PUC. So I have run mass market channels in my past career through AEP Energy, running residential. You have 3 folks here that are currently running these channels and all believe that they are, the best way to communicate with our end use market. So excited to talk about mass markets, give it a little, day in the sunshine. Intro, right? We're going to go through mass markets panel and then the wrap up. We are going to be having a lot of upcoming webinars, working with TIPA currently. They have a full week of webinars that we're planning for June 8th through June 12th with a whole slew of different topics. So stay tuned on that. And always, please, if you have ideas or things that you believe that we should be talking about and panelists that you want Power Matrix to go out and get, we're happy to. Send us your ideas, shoot me a personal email, connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to take it. As you guys know, we're running this in association with TIPA. TIPA had awarded Power Matrix the TIPA Affiliate of the Year. We love them. They love us. Kumbaya. And really, if you can, I'd encourage everybody to go to not only my page, but all of these panelists' LinkedIn pages as well to follow. If you follow them, you are going to get news alerts when they, release new statements, release new things, new programs, etc. We have a crazy amount of new news coming out, so please follow us on LinkedIn. So the panelists today, Lanson Jones Jr., Michael Drago Jr., and Roger Dupree Jr., which is totally not by design, but I think it's really funny, so calling it out in this, that they're all juniors. They all have dads with the same names, I guess, right? So, disclaimer on the screen, I want everyone to realize that obviously these are our opinions, our own opinions, not those of our companies. So please realize that, anything we say and do on this call, it's only our opinions. Power Matrix is putting these webinars on because we connect people through technology to increase trust in retail energy markets. This will be the only portion of the call that is dedicated to what we do, but I think it's really apropos to this conversation. Mass markets is all about building trust, right? And we as an industry, knowing that that is the way that the most amount of people are getting in touch with what retail energy is, trust is incredibly important. And for Power Matrix, trust is incredibly important as well. So we went out and got the gold standard in data security certification. It's called ISO 27001. Feel free to look it up. But we went ahead and got that, had our audit done earlier this year, passed with flying colors. And that means that all of the data that goes into Sparkplug for all of our brokers and our third party, mass market vendors and all the 112 clients that use Sparkplug, as well as our suppliers and the secure data exchange that communicates between the two, is all underneath this ISO 27001 certification. So best in class in data security will be a topic of conversation today. So as I introduce our panelists, I'm going to ask each of them to start off with just a little bit of a quick introduction about their company so you know who you're talking to and that's their background in the industry. So Mr. Drago, please, if you would start.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. Just some insight on WGL. We're a Northeast-based utility affiliate supplier with a relatively small footprint, currently focused in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, DC, a little bit in Ohio. So it's a little bit of a different business model. We're not the full footprint suppliers that you're used to seeing. Our mass market business is very important to us, and it's incredibly important that we maintain a high level of integrity as it relates to our mass market business. We have a saying internally that we will forfeit the sale to protect the company's reputation. So we put a lot of emphasis on making sure that the messages we deliver to customers through the various channels we use are clear, concise, honest, open, and any complaints that we receive through the public utility commissions are viewed and scrutinized intensely. Really, we have we have an internal measure of zero. We want zero complaints. So any complaint that we receive is very problematic because it goes all the way up to the top of the organization by virtue of the fact that we want to protect their reputation. That said, I think we do a pretty good job of our mass market efforts and offering products to customers and working with our vendors. And obviously, COVID has had a significant impact. Do you want me to go into the COVID impact now, Jason?
No, I'd ask that just break. Thanks for asking that for that break real quick, just so that we can introduce the other panelists. But then I'm going to come back to you quickly and really start talking about, what that impact was during this shutdown. So thank you for the introduction. Roger, please, the Eastwood.
So Eastwood is an exclusive to ERCOT broker. We're actually coming on our anniversary for 3 years in the next 2 days. Brad and I had started it kind of with the thought that it was going to be a broker for brokers and very customer centric. We both were in the field ourselves at one time. We saw the interactions with customers, and we realized how important it was not only to have a very strong culture for the people that work for us and to kind of put a lot of focus on ease of transaction for them, having a joyous time while out there in the field, because obviously, as we know, this industry can get a little stressful. So we try to put a lot of emphasis on our people, but also at the same time, our customers, because there are a lot of customers, especially in the ERCOT area, are in need of someone who can advise them on the best choices, especially the smaller customers that are sometimes overlooked, don't have that go-to guy or girl that they can get on the phone and show them what they need to do in the future or the present, of course. So our tenants are really our people and keeping it customer-centric, and we're continuing trying to grow. And has this COVID-19 pandemic given us a chance to look even further inward on what we can do better? So that's about us in a nutshell.
Yeah, excited for you to give a little bit more information on that. And Lanson, if you wouldn't mind, please introduce Everlast Energy.
So Everlast, we started about 3 years ago. Before that, I was on the supplier side with Beyond Power. So I uniquely have been on the supplier and the broker side, and going fully on the broker side, we focused, which I have last 10 years in the industry, on residential, even though we do some small and medium commercial as well. And 80% of our business is in ERCOT. We do operate in Illinois, Ohio, and Maryland, and we are mainly a face-to-face, non-door-to-door broker, being in grocery stores. So we are uniquely placed in the HEBs, the Jovies, and other chains, grocery stores. We're even in some CVS's, Walgreens, other places that are still open, yet we aren't back in them yet, but hopefully that will change in the next few weeks. And we have grown to over 200 agents in ERCOT over the past year and a half. We really have ramped up the recruiting, and like Roger was saying, a big part of it is culture for us as well, and just integrity, just always making sure that we have a low complaint ratio to sale ratio. And we really take a pride on taking complaints very seriously. And we also take pride in, we're unique in the fact that we really focus more on our residual business, even though we're residential. And we still get upfronts, but having the residuals from our book has really helped us survive through this COVID incident. And, just thankful to God that we kind of changed this model and focus on things that could help us get through this.
And leading up to this conversation, I know that we've talked about a lot of those things, and we'll address them. I'm excited. Traditionally, I think people refer to it as tabletop marketing or in-store retail sales as that channel. Again, incredibly powerful. I think also us in the industry, those are the ones we see, right? We all go to grocery stores. I see Green Mountain down here. I see, Lanson's people in some of the grocery chains down here too. So exciting to talk about that channel. Not sure how many people really know about that.
And also I want to add that we do have a online ambassador channel that we actually started before COVID. It was pretty small. It was relatively like 10 to 20% of our weekly sales, but I'll talk more into that aspect, but it allowed us to scale up our online ambassadors since no one could obviously sell in person. It really also was another strategy in us surviving during this and creating some revenue generation.
Absolutely. Very cool. We'll definitely touch on that. Michael, curious, like what, obviously there's a lot of different mass market channels. You got two of them here. You got inbound call, outbound calling, direct mail, municipal aggregations, et cetera. What were you seeing in terms of, WGL, in terms of which channels were higher volumes during COVID and which ones were completely shut down?
Well, prior to COVID, the majority of our sales were coming in through a fairly even balance of door-to-door marketing and telesales. Although we did have a certain amount of affinity groups that were bringing in some sales, web-based sales, direct mail sales, and we did have our direct mail campaigns tied to inbound calls to support that as well.
Online enrollments as well?
We do.
Web sales?
Yeah, we do indeed.
But the two primary ones were telesales and door-to-door.
The two primary drivers in the mass market in our service territories remain telesales and door-to-door. Door-to-door being very, depending on the aggressiveness of the offers and the various vendors that we contract with, it typically tends to be the largest producer of sales, also the largest producer of post-sale issues. With the follow-up with COVID, we shut down our door-to-door sales 100%. Actually, we were the first movers in the market. We decided to close door-to-door on March 13th with a letter to the vendors and actually to the marketplace. I think it made it to Energy Choice Matters. And that was done specifically because we did not want to incur any liability associated with door-to-door marketing that could potentially be accused of spreading COVID-19.
Damage the reputation. That's really helpful. And did you see it? So obviously, door-to-door went from X to 0, but then did you see an increase in some of the other channels sales during this, or was most of all channels kind of reduced because people were just not paying attention to retail?
No, we repurposed some of our vendors that had telesales capabilities into doing telesales. So by repurposing them, we were actually able to increase our telesales activity to partially offset the loss associated with door-to-door. Nevertheless, we are net down as a result of the fact that door-to-door is currently on a moratorium.
Makes sense, right? Being net down, but super cool that you guys, and this is what I've heard a lot of stories of, is repurposing resources to still be effective during the shutdown, and that business didn't stop. That's the beautiful thing about being in retail energy. To make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of nomenclature and kind of what we call these, I'm throwing out something, here is something that I've talked about, which is push marketing versus pull marketing, right? A pull market would be, a website, a direct mail campaign. You're letting the customer kind of choose if they want to interact with you or not. Where a push campaign is going to be more of a telesales or door-to-door, right? And so I've referred to this in the past, at least when I was at AEP, that a push channel, of course, is going to have higher, complaints and issues, et cetera, because you push somebody to do something. I mean, not literally, but that's the interaction. Versus pull, they came to you. So, they're less likely to, have issues because they've done their research, they've come to you, et cetera. So if you hear me in the next part of the conversation talk about push versus pull channels, generally speaking, that's what I'm talking about. But again, really cool that you guys repurposed resources there. So want to move on to, the stories from the workforce. It's really about the agents and I think a lot of the makeup of the folks that are on the phone would be considered managers or owners or channel vendor people at the suppliers, et cetera. So I'm curious, if you think about all the channels out there and then specifically for the independent business owners, I'm going to launch a poll here. And I'm curious at what percentage of the agents that you have out there or that are through your third-party channels do you see that are going to return to work post-COVID? And the reason why I'm asking this is because a lot of the folks seem to, with especially that extra $600 a week, be in pretty good shape and may or may not be returning. So I think we're curious to get some people voting on this now, and I'll share results. But in the meantime, while they're voting, Lanson, please start off and tell me a little bit about what happened with your workforce during this. What did you guys do, to make sure that your agents were taken care of, and share some good news stories with us.
So, started off, we pulled out of the market. It was partially us and partially as a supplier, and partially the grocery stores at this point at March 15th. So 2 days after WGL. And we were one of the sooner partners to pull out of this brokers, I would say, that sell in our space. And it really, we did it for the safety of the agents. A lot of them wanted to stay selling at that point, and we had to turn off all tablets and everything and figure out what we're going to do. And at that point, we converted everyone to basically inbound telesales agent, and allowing them to post on their social media. We gave them ad budgets to market. We gave them improved marketing materials online. And we really invested in a back office portal that was hugely upgraded. But from the agent's perspective, I mean, we went from the average agent doing 3.8 to 2.8 sales a day in the grocery store that was working a full shift to, under 0.5 sales per day per agent. So it was a dramatic impact in their weekly income. And we were waiting to hear from the suppliers. Some of the suppliers were saying, hey, we'll do a call every week, and everyone that's on it, we're thinking about doing $100-200 a week to help offset. And that did not end up happening out of the two suppliers that we're talking to. So the agents were really all, no one knew what was going to progress. So we're all kind of out of the loop, and we were just keeping the agents on a phone call. And I'll just put it this way. We have a massive power breakfast, over 100 people in the Houston office every week. And we started doing power breakfast through Zoom. And
virtual power breakfast.
Yeah, virtual power breakfast. And there was 152 people on the first call. The call this morning, there was 41. So that gives you kind of a show of how many people we may end up keeping. Obviously, a lot of people are going to come back and have already said, started emailing and calling us, asking when we're going to get started, when is the next power breakfast. And, a lot of them did get unemployment, even though they're 1099 through the disaster relief fund. And a lot of them are making as much or more than they were, through 1099. I don't know how that works out, but, it's pretty amazing that you can make more on unemployment than working. And when I say unemployment, 1099.
I know there's a lot of high earners on this call, but like if we think about the average earning and, $2,400 a month extra on top of, right, unemployment benefits, which roughly is $2,000. I mean, you're talking about $4,000 a month. That's a $50K take home salary, which is, it ain't too shabby. I completely agreed. So, and this is, so Lanson, I think your answer to this question of agents returning, you'd probably be in that, 51 to 75% bucket of the.
Yeah, I would assume it's 51. And we believe that we'll see an uptick in the recruiting due to the unemployment out there, which, is good and bad, right? We don't want people to be out of work, but it is good for recruiting.
And give them a home for.
So having that available and really just being there for the agent. So we have a reserve fund of 10% that we put aside until the agent hits $2,000. And we were able to release that, not only cover ourselves for chargebacks over a period of 4 weeks of exposure, since we have a 30-day chargeback with most of our suppliers, but it allowed us to release those funds strategically 20 to 25% a week. So a lot of these guys ended up with checks for $200 to $400 a week for a period of 4 to 6 weeks. And that really helped them survive during this time. And luckily we're in a position, me and my partner, Monty, have always been very conservative with keeping money in the bank for these times. So we have, given out quite a bit of advances and helping people in their personal situation. Not only do we care, but just it's the right thing to do in these times. And really, I think the companies that don't do these things are going to be a thing of the past. I mean, I really think it's for brand image as well, just sticking to your culture values and taking care of the people that built the company. And, during this transition, I have seen people step up in huge ways. And I have seen people that I thought would step up completely disappear. So we've been uniquely rewarding people based upon the efforts, even though it may not be a huge correlation with revenue increase, just who's all in during this time. And it's really given us a way to see who's all in under pressure and who we really want to rebuild with when we get back out there.
No, that's great. And a couple of key takeaways there for the audience. First off, I believe that, hey, this has impacted restaurant people the most, let's be honest, right? And travel industry as well, but restaurants especially. And I think it's going to be a while until restaurants are at full bore, even though I'm going to one today. Trust me, those in the Northeast, there is a return to normal. Come talk to me. I'm here in Houston with Roger and Lanson, and we know it well, and there is a return to normal. So I promise you guys, but it is different and it's spaced out, so it's not as big. And I would honestly say for any of the IBOs out there, hey, great recruiting. People that talk to people for a living as, restaurant servers and et cetera, it's a fairly easy transition. So concur with you, Lance, and I think there's going to be opportunity for sure. I'd like to move to Roger and kind of talk about what Eastwood did for the agents. And if you wouldn't mind during this portion, kind of touching on what you did to reduce or minimize your workforce turnover. And I am sharing the results, Roger, with the group. And basically it's saying that, 60% of people are saying that almost a full return and 40% of people saying it's less than a full return. So again, interesting statistics of what everybody says, but there's also 13% that are saying, a quarter of the agents or under, right, are going to return. So Lance, and that might go to what you're saying of, the impact of the organization.
A interesting statistic came out the other day that 1 in 5 teachers will not return to teaching. And it's a little bit different situation, obviously, being in a classroom full of kids and potential exposure. But I think overall, we're going to see 20 to 30% across the board.
Yeah, and there was a comment via chat. Kimberly, appreciate all the audience engagement about that unemployment has not helped the overall recruitment, and I think the panel would agree. I think what we're saying is that in the future it will. The $600 a week extra is, in my personal opinion, I don't know, please concur or deny, right, Roger and Lanson, but that is kind of what is keeping folks on the sideline or. Why would they even look for another job right now? Because they're making more than, hustling. So my point being unemployment, Kimberly, appreciate the question, but we're talking about, let's say fast forward late June, early July, that's when you're going to start to see these people who were getting extra $600 a week. They go to try to return to their job. They can't return to their job because they don't have a job. And that's occurring, at this point. So Roger, please tell us a little bit about, your agents, what you did for them and everything, please.
Got you. Well, first of all, about the teachers not returning to work, it is definitely a different industry, but I'd rather make a million cold calls over the course of my lifetime than be a teacher. I think they have a much tougher job, so got to dab up the teachers there. So for our workforce impact here, there's really two sides actually to Eastwood. I know we talk a lot about commercial side a lot, but we also have a D2D program through NRG as well. My partner, Mindy Lopez, that was probably one of the most stressful times I've seen for her. As soon as we obviously got the news, that was pretty much a nail in the coffin for all these agents that's really the only living they could make. So she put in a ton of time to go through pretty much a roller coaster back and forth of what was going to happen. So in terms of that workforce, it's going to be hard to tell how many are going to come back at that point because, as you said, they're still going to be on that unemployment. And I think that goes out into July 1st, if I recall. But for the most part, we've been really transparent over here during this whole time, trying to help as much as we can. When it actually even came to unemployment, identifying those individuals who would be better for, and Mindy really helped on this, identifying which individuals would really be for the PPP loan as a 1099 contractor or just going on unemployment. So there's a lot of discussion of what our agents should do because the really main thing when it comes down to it is their well-being and them getting through this, right? As a company, Eastwood was going to get through this and be fine financially. However, we wanted to make sure that our team on both sides was going to be able to get through this pandemic because, as this was going on, we weren't sure how long it was going to go for. So the main factor was how basically they can get through this time. So the things we did to kind of help out there, obviously on the commercial side as well, they could not be going out in the field and meeting customers face to face. That was just no longer reality. And even now, that's a bit of a changed reality, of course. So over the course of the time, the biggest thing we're trying to do is keep positivity up. We've had basically a call every morning at 9, getting everyone on friendly faces. And I have to say that was something I look forward to almost every morning. We definitely kept
your attendance of those. Speaking to what Lanson talked about, right?
Pretty much.
I love daily stand-ups, by the way. Daily stand-ups are fantastic.
Yeah. So we have a small commercial team, but it was pretty much 100% of everyone. Almost. So it was pretty cool. So that was good, of course. And the switch, as I know Michael had mentioned, kind of switching over to telesales, we've kind of had to help retrain and help out some of our agents kind of through discussion. We've always relied a lot on in-person B2B just because that was one of the best ways to give our all to the customer, that really personal touch. So now going to the phones was a bit different. We've had a lot of those calls in the morning, kind of how to construct a quick and easy email, how to go over what we can offer over the phone without being intrusive. That was a huge thing. We really wanted to make sure that any prospects or customers that we reached out to were well aware that we were very cognizant of their situation as well. Everyone's hurting right now. And we wanted to make sure that when we had our agents calling on these customers that they knew we knew that as well. And it was empathy first, lead with empathy. And if a sale could come in, that's great. If we could give value, that's great. But definitely, we had a really huge change in how we did business, how we tried to bring in new business. So really that affected our workforce as well, of course, right? Because then they are in a situation where what they've learned and what they've relied on is not something they can do. So because of that, because we know that it was very stressful for our agents, we tried to do everything we could possible to kind of lift them up and be there for them, which, first, obviously financially, second, if they're going to continue to try to make sales, how to do that, how we can support them. So it was really interesting time would be a word I would use, but to sum it all up, the biggest impact for us in our Salesforce residential side, commercial side, was just changing their behaviors and making sure they weren't stressed out financially. So that was the main thing. But for commercial, I think we're going to have almost 100% of the people that we came in with coming back. So excited about that.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I would agree that much better chance of people returning in the commercial side, than residential. But I really do. Again, that's where we're going to be able to recruit more agents. There will be a lot more turnover. But yeah, great. Again, talking about the different channels. I just launched a poll as we bring this back to Mr. Drago, talking about some of the statistics changes that he's seeing in the different channels. But the poll that we're running is, and feel free to do multiple choice here, right? So suppliers, if you're running multiple channels, and folks that are on the call that just do one channel. curious to see the makeup of the audience, right? What types of channels are folks running? Right now, everything's coming in with a pretty even split, but feel free to, choose multiple here, multiple choice answers. And Michael, just in terms of those different channels that we talked about, what are you seeing in terms of the difference in usage, changes? Have you seen any usage changes from the residential book of business versus the small commercial, and any statistics to share with the audience there?
Yeah, I think we've seen, and this is supported by what we see on the PJM website, since we're our entire footprint is in PJM. We've seen it be a 10% increase on the residential side of the business. And in terms of the fall off on the small commercial, many of those small commercials have fallen off significantly if they've shut down their businesses, especially if they're retail type of businesses like restaurants of that nature. But the residential is partially offsetting that that fall off.
I know certain verticals, like what you said, are going to be more huge drop-offs, like overall across the small commercial landscape of mass markets. Are you seeing a drop-off that's higher than the offset to residential, like by double? Or
I think the drop-off is actually less than what we expected. I think we expected to see a greater drop-off than we saw. A lot of these businesses are still and obviously they're still connected to the utility. They still have their lights on. There's still some consumption that's going on, and so the consumption didn't go to zero on small commercial, or even large commercial for that matter. But on the residential side, we have seen an uptick somewhere in the area of around 10%, where overall PJM across the board is showing about a 10% reduction.
Fantastic. I think that, that mirrors a lot of our past panelists that we've had when we talk about statistics, in terms of that commercial actually dropped a little less than everyone expected. And that was a big fear for a lot of our customers, our brokers out there that play, mainly in the small commercial and medium commercial space. Are you seeing anything in terms of bad debt ratios changing yet, or is it still really too early to tell, Michael?
Well, in mass market, I think that question is better directed towards the utilities that support POR programs. The mass market business tends to rely heavily on POR platforms through BSAs with utilities, billing service agreements. So I think one can expect that, but I think the orders that were issued by the governors and by the public utility commissions about disconnecting customers have been upheld by the utilities, but it'll be the utilities that ultimately will report back on whether or not they see an increase in bad debt in the mass market side because of the POR nature of the BSAs.
And the nature of those markets, it's basically a delay, and pointed question there, which is it's too early to tell, right, of what bad debt we're really going to see. And that mandate of shut off. Quick question: what percentage of customers do you feel like are really seeing that? Obviously, within the industry, we're all seeing that it affects us. We're watching news wires, et cetera. But do you think the average Joe consumer is seeing that and going, "Oh, wait a minute, that means I don't have to pay my utility bill"? Or is that something that you don't really think filters down to the end-use customer as a norm?
Well, if you're asking me that question, I think bad debt's always an issue depending on the economic strata of the customers that you're dealing with. I think people that have remained employed and have been able to shift to working from their offices to their homes, I don't think it's an issue. I think for those folks that have lost their jobs, it's highly problematic, and you could see an uptick. And what that'll probably eventually result in is an increase in the discount rate associated with POR payments, which would drive prices up as suppliers look to adjust their prices to recover that discount. So again, it's too soon to know for sure, but I think anybody that follows the economics of these types of things could assume that defaults will go up. And utilities, they have a completely different perspective on all this. Politically, they're not going to be supported by cutting people off during this pandemic. So effectively what will end up happening is that you'll just see deferred payments, and then eventually they'll probably end up having to refinance those balances, and that'll translate into higher discounts, which will translate into higher prices to absorb those discounts on the supplier side.
Absolutely, in all those POR markets. So yeah, great perspective. Really appreciate the share. I'm going to move to Lanson and talk a little bit about the the impacts to the residential side of the business. And, I know you were seeing differences in your commissions. I do see questions coming in, by the way, audience, definitely going to get there. I'm going to end this poll because before Lanson starts, I think this is really interesting. If you look through this, basically, right, there is an even distribution for the most part on this call, and I find it to be in the industry as well, in terms of these mass market channels that are being run, right? People wouldn't even consider like municipal aggregation. A lot of people are like, what's that, right? That's a pretty popular channel now, especially in New York, Ohio. It's always been in other territories. Direct mail, yes, that's still around, and yes, it still works. I did it successfully for 3.5 years with a captive Ohio market through AEP Energy. And again, the door knocking and in-store sales, still some of the highest, as well as phone sales outbound, still the most prevalent. So interesting things coming out from the polls. Now I'm sharing those results, my bad. So feel free to look through those results. And in the meantime, Lanson, tell me a little bit about what you're seeing on the residential side in terms of your commissions, right, from the past few months. Are you seeing an increase, decrease?
Yeah, well, I'll speak more specifically about Texas, even though we are in some of the Northeast markets. It's interesting because obviously Texas isn't a POR market, and they did an adder, I believe it was 33 cents per megawatt for giving back to suppliers so they don't disconnect during the period. And they lifted that. But, I think a lot of suppliers from the residential side are concerned for next month because that's when evictions formally start here in Texas. So it will be interesting to see how much that affects bad debt, since it's not a POR market, and even the deferred payments, even though we have switch hole mechanisms and things like that. I think that's where really, only time can tell. But there is going to be a substantial uptick in bad debt for the suppliers that are mainly in ERCOT, whether it's commercial or residential focused books, in my opinion. The other thing is the usage has gone up. We saw in April about a 12 to 14% increase in usage compared to last year. And the month before that, it was 6 to 8% increase is what we saw, since we only got about half the month where most people were at home, creating an uptick in the usage. And really, for most parts of Texas, it was the last week of that month that the uptick really happened. That's why it's 6 to 8%, I would assume. And we continue to see these summer-like bills come in early, which from a residual standpoint is great for us and our customers. We haven't seen a big drop-off of customers. We've actually seen less switchaways during this time than we do normally, even though we haven't been able to add substantial numbers to the book during this time. So it's actually been somewhat of a saving grace for us and our suppliers that we deal with when we analyze the books of how many people have fallen off this far compared to the average of what we were seeing last year.
And so you're seeing basically very consistent data in terms of drop-offs, like true drops?
Yeah, consistent data, and actually less than normal, surprisingly. I think, when you look at from a consumer's perspective, the last bill that they're going to take a risk on is their power when they're stuck at home, and not able to really, the fear of switching and having their power disconnected is real, and people just not making change during these times. And that's been, a major focus. I know Roger was talking about, but we really, on our online ads, we focused on just being real, like we care. And then when the person responds to whatever that the article is about, and it has nothing to do with advertising energy, and we develop that one-on-one messenger conversation, that's when we go to asking them, who's your energy provider? After we've talked about, what's more current on their mind than their electricity bill. And we had a really good response that way too.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome campaign. And just, again, in sharing statistics, and when we talk about why have we seen a less of drop rates or the same drop rates as normal, even during this pandemic where people might be leaving. I would also say that from my recollection, and Michael, again, please feel free to agree or disagree, et cetera, but my recollection of our churn rates when I was at running residential for AEP, 1 to 1.5% churn per month was just people moving, like the churn that you can't control. Now that churn in this market is gone, right? Like who the heck is moving? Not many people at the end of the day, right? Nobody's proactively moving, and maybe that makes a bigger uptick in drop rates for the summer. And I think that's what we're trying to tell the audience to be on the lookout for, even those that are resi focused. You might have had some nice commission checks, during COVID, even bigger if you're on some residual payments than what you expected, but then still be wary of you're coming into the summer. I think you're going to see higher move rates. And I think you're going to see some aggressive marketing campaigns as people, get back out there and try to sell. So it'll always be good. I think I'm coaching the audience on the fact that please make sure that you're talking to the customer about their current contract, what the break fees are, and all of that, so that the customer sentiment doesn't get worse in the industry. But, Michael, any thoughts on that in terms of, that standard drop rate versus the controllable drop rate?
Yeah, I wish the standard drop rate was the rate that we had to deal with in this industry. I think the churn rate is always a challenge. It's always a problem. And there are methods that could be looked at to increase retention by offering customers expanded services or products to keep them sticky. I don't think anybody has really solved the churn rate issue beyond what you're talking about, the base rate churn as a result of people relocating. So that's something that we're always looking at. And I don't think COVID has affected that in any way. I think customers move because of aggressive marketing. They move from supplier to supplier because of aggressive marketing from competing suppliers. That's probably the number one driver. And without good retention programs in place, churn is always going to be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, there was some programs that we ran that had upwards of 5% churn rate, per month. And obviously, if a customer, think about it logically, if a customer is willing to take a meeting from a door-to-door agent or a telemarketing agent to be over the phone, they're going to take another call too, right? So this is where, Roger, I'd love to kind of get your experience from this on the commercial side, and then just mindful of time. We have 15 minutes left. I want to make sure we get into the supplier partner changes, the payments, et cetera. But Roger, kind of curious in terms of the statistics or anything you're seeing that you wanted to add there.
For commercial, it wasn't so much that we see individuals closing their doors or dropping off. The biggest thing, obviously, that we're working with some of our customers is helping them navigate the situation when it comes to payment with the suppliers, being able to defer on and deferment of the disconnections, of course. But in terms of usage variance, we right now are trying to pull as much of the usage as possible, so kind of so we could see what the impact was. But for the most part, especially since a large portion of our customers are in the hospitality as well as the food and beverage industry, there's going to be a huge change there. But not so much that customers were dropping off. It's actually one weird thing that we didn't even think of that we were seeing as one of the biggest problems with customers switching away is there's been a lot of desperation in the industry. So we've been seeing some other individuals in the industry or brokerages in the industry or agents actually guaranteeing some sort of, COVID bonus if they switch away and break their contract. We've seen some wilder things that we haven't seen in non-pandemic days. So it's interesting how the things that we didn't even think were possible were the things that we're dealing with more than actually the customers defaulting on the contract. So
is there anything you do? Yeah, it is interesting. Is there anything that Eastwood does to keep in touch with the customers during the course of their agreements to try to prevent churn?
It's actually interesting that you bring that up because we've realized that we kind of want to amp that up more. Obviously, we're in our, I guess, junior year, third year. So of course, we have each broker that is tied to the individual customer. So they're going to be talking to them as their contract is coming up. But we realize now that we really want to amp up more and more from an operations side standpoint, making those touches on a more normal. So before it was very much the pressure was on the broker, and moving forward out of this pandemic, we want to make it so that the whole team at Eastwood is kind of in contact. Well, not the whole team, but
but those individuals for the thing, right?
Yeah, so they have that our brokers have backup in the sense of coming from Eastwood to be in touch with those customers, so those customers are even more aware of exactly what they have going on if they weren't already.
And, in this platform that we have, I really try to make sure that the audience gets value out of every one of these webinars we do. And so just sign up sharing my own personal ideas. And again, shameless plug, obviously, if it's coming out of my brain, it's already in our software, right? So realize that. But one of the ideas that we had for the brokers that we serve is that like an email engine within your CRM, right? That automatically communicates, but you get to create your own templates. But when I think of templates and things and touch points that I would like to do with customers, if I had them, which I don't, would be, I think there's a touch point on the sign date, obviously. There's a touch point on the start date. I think there should be a touch point 45 days after the start date, which is when they're going to get their first bill. And then I really feel like every 6 months during the course of the contract, with notifications starting more frequently, 12 months out or 18 months out or whenever you decide to do it, right? So I think touch points are incredibly important in terms of reducing that flow, and software can help you. So anyway, we'll move on, but just again, sharing with the audience some of my personal experience. And I think this next one's gonna be a really big topic, and we'll kick it off by a poll here in terms of how important upfront payments are. And there is a different type of question for the suppliers on the phone versus the broker vendors. So please read that. And we'll kick off the commission things. We do have a question from the audience. If anybody, I will answer if you guys don't, because I know this. But Mark Rice, thanks for the engagement. The question is, what is the average annual commission per Resi customer? And I think what you should do is answer this on a yearly basis, what the average revenue is. And an average customer, I know Mark had asked a question about 10,000 kWh, which in terms of retail, REC, right? Residential equivalents, right? The residential equivalent calculation, 10,000 is used for that. However, the national average is more like 12 and a half. In Texas, it's even higher. And then in certain areas like New York, it's lower because of condos and stuff like that. Again, sharing statistics from my legacy brain. Lanson, any thoughts on that on the residential side? What's the average commission per year?
It varies obviously by usage. In the Northeast, we get paid substantially less. So you're looking around $100 per fuel in the Northeast. And since Texas is electric only and heavier electric use, and mind you, most of the contracts we sign up are 2 and 3 year contracts. So this would be, upfront plus a little bit of residual. We're looking at, anywhere from $200 to $300 in the Texas arena, depending on price and supplier and duration of contract.
Great, appreciate that answer. And again, love the customer and the participant engagement. And so when we kind of work on this next piece, and I would say that we probably have about 1 or 2 more rounds, for each of us to talk, and we're going to be covering some really fun and important topics. But let's talk about, a story. Roger, I'll kick this off with you, but tell me a little bit about the story of how the supplier partners are treating you differently right now, and also touch on how important upfront revenue is to you within your business model.
Well, obviously, upfront is a pretty big part of our business model, since we have the B2B agents that definitely rely on that. Now, during this pandemic, we've had some suppliers who haven't changed at all in their upfront payments, a couple that have. And we've been able to kind of weather this storm for the most part. And, the biggest thing for the suppliers that have had to make significant changes is the individuals that we work with in that supplier channel. our supplier manager or their immediate boss, they're not making these decisions on the changes. So that's, I think, the biggest thing we realized at first is that the messengers that are bringing us the news, on this case, they aren't the ones making the decisions. And also the decisions that are being made aren't specifically against us, right? They're decisions made as a company, as a supplier. And with that said, the individuals that we're working with, they want to make sure things are smooth and good for us. So we had a specific situation where we actually had a lot of chargebacks come all at once that we weren't even aware of, at the same time that there was being an upfront payment being changed. And it was definitely a curveball that we didn't really want to see, of course. And I have to call out Mindy Lopez, my partner, on this as well, because she did a lot of work in the situation where we were kind of faced with this negative impact situation while going all through this. And coming from a big financial and operational standpoint as she had, she really helped us put together a case to say, hey, look, this is not the best thing for us. How can you guys help? And the suppliers obviously are making decisions that are way coming up from the up top, but those individuals that we work with on a daily basis, they really went to bat for us. So I would say it's the individuals that are supporting each other. You know, I don't really want to look at it from a company standpoint, but it's the people within those companies that are really care for each other, right? You know, decisions that are made by a company as a whole are decisions that are made sometimes potentially without, individual people in mind. And that gap is kind of bridged by those persons within the industry. So, we were able to work together, made that ask, and that we would have been able to weather if that we were told no. Definitely, they worked with us and were able to kind of parse out those chargebacks for the future. So definitely there were. I would have to say that there's, and I'm sure other brokers have other stories with other suppliers. It's a situation where your channel manager or their immediate boss is given a situation that they had no say in. And I'd really have to say that the people that we work with across all suppliers, regardless of any changes, they've been there in our corner the whole time, no matter what. And they really care about us.
It shows the importance of the channel manager relationship and, all the folks that are out there that work hard on, supporting their vendors and channels. And I appreciate the approach that Eastwood has taken, but I would also call out the fact that suppliers on the phone who have these vendors, you have to look especially in terms of you can't double up an impact, right? That's the main issue here is thinking about it from okay, if it's an impact to my broker and I already know that they're having another impact at hand, right, in the case of COVID, and you double down on that, what issues that causes. And again, it's not to say don't make the decision. We all make decisions, just like we would maybe pass along a charge, in a change of law situation to the end use customers. There's reasons to do it. It's just we need to understand the impacts, and especially the impacts to our vendor partners. They're the one, and again, it hurts recruiting, it hurts other things. It can take a long time for those channels to rebound. So really glad that they worked with you, Roger, on that.
Yeah, I'd have to say it's a really clear picture that after this pandemic, the channel managers, at least in the broker space, are the real MVPs.
Appreciate that. Lanson, any good news stories from you to share that, from your supplier support partners? And then after that, I'm going to go over to Michael to talk a little bit more about, this importance of upfronts in our industry. And we're getting the polling results right now. So keep voting on that, audience, please.
Yeah, so obviously we rely heavily on upfronts to pay our residential agents so they can make a good living doing this. And from a company standpoint, a few years back, and just coming from the REP side, I've always been a big believer in monthly recurring revenue, so residuals in our business, and that has really led to helping us a whole lot during the situation. And the suppliers that we deal with, like I said earlier, some of them were wanting to offer agents 100, 200 a week potentially, and then they didn't know how long it was going to go for, so they couldn't get approval for 8 to 12 weeks of that, and how many agents would get paid. Would it be based upon previous sales? All those things. So we went back and forth for a while, and they ended up deciding not to do anything like that, and pretty much no bonuses. They did offer us, one supplier offered us a advance, and they would just blend and extend that advance through future commissions. Everlast wasn't in a bad financial position, so we said no to that advance opportunity. And coming from a upfront and residual standpoint, I would say we're even fighting more in our with some of our new relationships and existing relationships to possibly even get paid less upfront for an exchange of increased residuals, so we can even more we can rely better on our recurring monthly revenue. And just doing the reserve that we did of 10% really helped us as a company when we got hit with some of those clawbacks. And the suppliers we deal with, since we're a relatively big partner for most of them, they are willing to make special circumstances like blend the chargebacks over additional weeks, things like that. And I know from a supplier standpoint, everyone is in a tight cash position. So I completely understand why some of the higher ups are making these decisions not to essentially give away free money. So I get that completely. I know some of the other suppliers and other vendors I talked to have said, they got hit with a lot of chargebacks all at once and they really needed that revenue. But I think a lot of it comes down to, like Roger said, talking to your channel manager and being on the same page and getting them to go to their leadership to ask. And if you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no. So always, being on the same page with them, and obviously being a big partner, they usually will help as much as they can. And that's what we've seen. But we did notice from some of our small commercial deals with one supplier in particular, they, we don't do a whole lot of the small and medium business, so it wasn't a huge impact to us, but we had chargebacks from 2018 and 2019, and it was just because they hadn't charged us back because their systems and their reporting was so poor, it didn't track them correctly. And I really thought that was not the best way to handle it from the supplier's perspective, because they didn't give us a call. They didn't let us know. We just got hit with it. And they're like, oh yeah, we found those from a couple of years back and we just had to charge them back.
This is where I really feel like technology is going to win the day here, and transferring information system to system. We all know that this is what Power Matrix is up to, slow and steady as participants come in, but there is a path forward to this, right? This data exchange of information. Michael, you get this information, these drops, et cetera, via electronic data interchanges, right? With the utilities, the way that I understand it.
We do, yes.
And then obviously, and this is kind of where, that information is coming into a system. There might be some manual processes to dole those out as they come into your book to the different partners to go back and re-enroll or to inform them in the commercial space via drops. And I think this is the thing that I hear most from my broker partners is I want that data to come back to me via an API or EDI or whatever you want to call it, right? System to system communication. So we're not there as an industry yet, but it's a continuous topic of conversation. Lance and Roger, appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. And let's continue to drive it forward on the technology front. So these things like massive clawbacks for a year and a half, which I could only imagine the impact to your business, don't happen again in the future. Come talk to us. Having said that, Michael, love to kind of think about your opinions here. We're going to go one more round through the panelists here. I know we're at 10:30. We'll go probably another 15 minutes here for all those participants on the phone. And those who have to drop off, there will be a recording. But we did do this poll. It's basically 50-50, Michael. You got, 50% of people saying it's incredibly, it would be, if upfronts went away, it'd be a big impact to the business. You got 50% of people saying, get rid of them. Doesn't really matter, right? So would love your thoughts on upfronts versus not upfronts, what your policies are at WGL, and,
Yeah, I'd like a list of all the vendors that say they only do residuals, because in a perfect world, I would only do residuals. Most of the problems associated with things like clawbacks that Roger and Lansing are talking about are directly related to upfront payments. Upfront payments are a loan against a customer that may or may not materialize at a volume level, may or may not stick for the term that those allocated dollars were intended for. We have lots of financial metrics around customer acquisition costs or cost to acquire, and we keep a very close eye on those numbers. And all of that is subject to what we were talking about before in terms of churn. It becomes highly problematic. In a perfect world where everything is on flow or residual, effectively you're paying for what flows through the meter. And when you're paying for what flows through the meter, you're never going to lay out money that isn't directly associated with the revenue of a kilowatt hour that flows. And so upfront payments has always been problematic in this industry. In my opinion, whether it's on the C&I side or the mass market side, because you always have this issue of not only doing upfront payments, which is effectively a loan, you got to deal with the clawback issue when those customers drop. You got to deal with true ups as it relates to hybrid scenarios where you have an upfront payment and then a residual associated with it. So all of these things lend to operational challenges on the supplier. Now, I'm not naive to the fact that the industry at the mass market level operates on an upfront basis, mostly by virtue of the fact that people need to get paid. But my opinion is, as vendors in the marketplace, you're hiring people. Those people are being hired to do a job. Most other industries do not tie payments directly related to a sale that takes place on any particular day and then remit payment immediately or almost immediately thereafter. There's
especially on deals that might not start flow for 6-12 months in the future, right?
Definitely an issue in the C&I space. So the bottom line is that upfront payments remain problematic and an operational challenge for all suppliers. I don't think there's a supplier in the marketplace that doesn't struggle with it. And I'm actually, frankly, that survey surprised me that 24% of the vendors voted that they only do residual, because that's probably operationally the easiest way to manage the business.
It is. And in follow up to that, I would tell people two things. First off, there are other financing arms out there in financial vehicles. If you have your book in order and had a great cash flow of future receivables, I could introduce you to 3 or 4 to 5 companies that would easily pay you a hefty percentage, 85, 90% of those future revenues, and take over those cash flows for you, right? So taking off the risk for you for, a little bit of a premium. So there is that option. And then from the supplier standpoint, if it's a technological challenge, et cetera, between Power Matrix and a company called Kraft, we've solved this problem for 2 retailers already and continue to do that. So, I do think there's a way and path forward for those suppliers that want to do that. But I concur with you. There are definitely more problems with upfront deals. We're starting to see that in Texas with a few news stories that will be coming out shortly as well. So stay tuned on that. So with the final pass here of our panelists, we have this launched question of the crystal ball outlook, right? When are we going to return to normal in terms of deal flow, volumes reaching the same levels that we had last year at this time? So, September of 2020 versus September of 2019. And so just talk about the path forward in general, Lance, and about all the questions we talked about on our pre-calls. Tell me what the future looks like for Everlast. And when do you feel that there's going to be a return to at the same statistics or above from last year?
So I'll kind of make a summation, because obviously we're all estimating here. But with the suppliers I deal with, and just personally how we feel about the safety of our agents. Obviously, some of the agents are like, I'll sign the waiver. I want to go out today. I would have started, a month ago if I could have. But for us, rolling out from a brand perspective and just holistically, we're looking at rolling out in the next 2 weeks and doing a phased relaunch. So we're going to roll out a couple stores each week and scale back up to normal over a period of 2 to 3 months. So I would say from a deal perspective, we are looking at September before we really see same or similar numbers, and how apprehensive will people be to communicate at a grocery store compared to before COVID. So we don't know the answer to that. I think that we will see a 20 to 30% reduction. And from our standpoint, we have grown our online channel substantially through online ambassadors and influencers online. So that channel, I believe, will really exceed the loss that we will incur from being mainly face-to-face focused. And some of our agents will obviously decide to stay home for quite a while, maybe even past September, for those that are at high risk, and they will continue to bring in sales online and get better at doing so. So I believe in September, between online and face-to-face, we'll be at the same, maybe even a higher number than we're at, due to being able to recruit online ambassadors as well as face-to-face sales agents, and the opportunity that a lot of people are going to be looking for opportunity to make income as fast as possible, especially as unemployment falls off for the payments of unemployment.
Yeah, attendees, keep voting on this, crystal ball outlook. You just heard Lansing, say September. And I also heard, diversification in channels is what's going to drive you to an earlier return to normal than maybe some others that are just going to try to stick with what they know and, the traditional way of doing business. So diversification in channels, that's what I love about you, Lansing. You're always coming up with the next idea, right? I've known you for quite a while now. I know that always happens. So, again, attendees, please continue to vote on that question. Roger, what are you seeing, in your return to normal, and what's your crystal ball outlook look like?
Oh man, if I had a real crystal ball, I'd be living on an island that I purchased myself.
Amen. It would be on Michael Drago's boat right there.
Yes, exactly.
We had to call it up.
Maybe thinking maybe July potentially. Obviously, I can't really speak to our D2D program, but from a commercial standpoint, we're thinking July. It's gonna be interesting out there, because almost all my agents are pretty sure all my commercial agents want to get back out there. And we're gonna leave it up to them how they want to proceed, of course, and recommendations to be as safe as possible, and to be as conscious as possible or cognizant of as possible of what as I said before, the business owners are going through. So it's definitely going to be a different atmosphere out there that I've already gotten feedback from. But I think there's going to be an interesting variable a lot of people are talking about, and I actually want to kind of tie back in the upfront payment situation. There's a lot of the B2B in-person commercial brokers rely heavily on upfront payments, and there's been a lot of changes in certain suppliers. And with that said, and I'll make a side note here, by the way, I definitely believe upfront you should always have that be your kind of startup, and then of course long-term divest from it if you're going to be a big player for a long time in the industry. But with brokers that have B2B agents that rely on these upfront payments, maybe they don't have their full force coming back, or maybe they aren't able to continue to pay those upfront payments, so they don't have as many individuals on the street. So there might be a situation where we're going back out there, or my guys are going back, and guys and girls are going back out there, and they aren't up against as much competition. And there's customers that are without a broker or without an agent. So as Lansing had mentioned, there might be an increase in sales, and I don't want to say for sure, but I'm hopeful that at least for my team, that could be the case. So to sum it up, I really think July, we're going to kind of see a normalcy in terms of deal flow. Definitely not a normalcy in how they're interacting with customers out there, and we're going to continue to adapt and change there. But I think there could be an uptick going into the late part of the summer, end of the year, at least for Eastwood.
First off, I love the positivity, and I'll comment. So yeah, great. I totally agree with you on everything you said as well. We did have a question from the audience that I answered, but again, just if you or Lance have any thoughts of this, the question is we're saying heading out in 2 weeks, kind of allowing face-to-face sales, and so is that really happening? Do we have announcements? And Lance, and there are states that are, especially in Texas as well, that are allowing tabletop, right, in-store retail sales, that for sure. And then also I heard, as watching the industry wires, that Ohio is basically saying we're not going to do a blanket, statement, but any supplier can produce to us what they're doing, what channel they want to run, and we'll make that decision to lift that that ban on a case-by-case basis. And I bet you that, and this happened yesterday, so I bet you all the suppliers that are doing business in Ohio now are putting together hey, we're wearing masks, we're doing this. Lanson's done different things from a technology standpoint to wipe down iPads every time, in the retail store sales and things like that. So, yes, there is a return, but, Lanson, any comments there?
Yeah, so all of the supplier partners we deal with have dealt with their software partners on making the sale contactless. So no signature required on our tablet, but it will be required on the person's phone, as well as a text TPV with some of the suppliers we deal with. So, it would be on their own device. And from a safety standpoint, it's really the supplier, us, and the grocery stores or retail stores that we're in. And we are going above and beyond. I mean, we have an app that we developed that the agent is required to, check in at the location. They have to answer questions about symptoms and say, no, I haven't had any symptoms, and if they do, they're not allowed to go into work. They have to, take a picture of their temperature once a day before they go in, and that's in the app. So really, going above and beyond, not only having masks and sanitizer, gloves, the whole nine. We're even doing a pilot of plexiglass, and we really feel that the agents are going to really see a different feel out there. So we're pushing for face shields. So hopefully eventually we can not wear masks and have face shields so they can see the lips of the person and really the facial reactions of the agent to see that they're talking to them.
Love the sharing of what technology and what changes you're doing for a better return to normal. And honestly, any of those people that are on the call, reach out to any of the panelists. We are all pretty much, incredibly aware of what we're doing to a return to a new normal. And business owners are thinking and being proactive about it. So we're happy to share our thoughts on that. Michael, we'll wrap up with you in terms of just your crystal ball outlook, and I will share polling. Again, audience, I really feel like as we wrap up this conversation, just like there was 10 weeks ago when we started all these webinars, 12 weeks now that we started these webinars, there's always been a pessimistic attitude, and that's great. I mean, let's think about worst case scenarios, or, plan for worse than, and if it's better, great. I mean, that's the way we should all live our lives. But I would say that you got an optimist here in saying that I do believe there's going to be a return to normal. I'm seeing it. And we, had pessimistic views in terms of the polls, in terms of what the usage reductions were going to be, and they didn't materialize. And I hope that return to normalcy, what people are saying is that, Q4 is the one people landed on, but there's a significant portion of the audience that's saying not until next year at this time. So again, hope we're wrong, but good to know what the audience is sharing here. I'm sharing results. And Michael, wrap us up with your crystal ball outlook. And 5 minutes, we'll wrap up this conversation.
Well, we're not going to return to normal. We're going to return to a new normal. And this is also a very regional discussion, too, because the Northeast has obviously been impacted most greatly by this in terms of actual infections and deaths. And none of us are scientists, and none of us are virologists or immunologists. So I know that suppliers are going to be very concerned about liability associated with any kind of experiences with their own staff and or with their vendor partners as it relates to any kind of interpersonal transactions. And you have to realize in the Northeast right now, the governors and the regulators are running those markets. And so 2 weeks is not going to happen here in the Northeast, maybe Q4. But there's going to be the regulators and the governors that open up those markets. It's not going to be the suppliers or the vendors that want them to open. I know everybody wants to go back to business, but there's this theory about herd infection rates, and that is that the entire American public will have to be infected by COVID before there's a sense of what the percentage of people that are actually getting ill by. And we're not at that herd infection rate. We're not at the testing rate. And I'm not a scientist, but I do not believe 2 weeks is realistic in the Northeast. Q4 maybe. In the meantime, the focus will be on the alternative marketing strategies that allow for executing transactions without personal contact.
Absolutely. Regional for sure. And just like we look, to what the countries that were infected before us did and didn't do and how, our government's responding, et cetera. I also think as a country, we're such a big country and we have all these different states that are all those different geographies that in Texas, look to us down here in Texas, talk to somebody in Texas, we will have a sooner return to normal. And that's just because we weren't as heavily impacted in Texas as other areas. So again, feel free to reach out to us. And first off, I want to thank these panelists, immensely. This has been an amazing panel. I hope, folks tell other folks about it and watch the replay. The replay will be made available tomorrow. I get to listen to how much I hate my voice, when I replay it for myself. It's my own personal thing. But I did want to touch really quickly on the fact that, Sparkplug is known as a broker product mainly. And it's not. It's become a massive software that supports a variety of different things. And just, you guys are the first to know this. This is the brand new launch that Sparkplug, the Power Matrix product, now includes the ability to manage mass market channels, teams, offices, splits, commissions, agents, all with automated processing. So you talked about the data exchange between the supplier, right, and your CRM, which is incredibly important, and we're working on that. But today, we already have integrations like we have with TLP software, where if you're using a front-end software to do tablet-based sales, why wouldn't that automatically transfer into your CRM? And what other processes can you help, right, automate in terms of reconciling your payment files from suppliers, making sure you got paid on all TPV deals? That's what Power Matrix claim to fame is. We have solutions that are more geared for mass market commission reconciliation, as well as small commercial and medium commercial and large commercial businesses. And we really do feel like, listen, the only way that we move forward as an industry is to get more technologically savvy. Whether that's Power Matrix, Salesforce, whatever you want to use, we don't care. We have to start using more technology as an industry. And I know I have the support of these panelists for sure on that. And with that, I'm just going to mention that recording of today's session is going to be available, and the slides from today, and a little Sparkplug stimulus. Any customers signing up now, of course, right? Why not? It's a sales pitch. We're going to give a first month free just so that they can, rebound from COVID, and any of these impacts from a lower commission standpoint won't have an effect on them in terms of new costs. So with that, panelists, thank you so much. Anything to say in closing? Michael? Good. Roger, thank you from the bottom of my heart, man. Eastwood, long time friend. Appreciate you, all your support of TIPA and everything you do. And Lanson, surely, obviously, in sponsoring industry awards like you did at EMC. How many other brokerage firms are doing that? And the answer is not many. So, your support of the industry has been fantastic. We're getting some thank yous. Kimberly Warren, thank you so much for the comment. Getting some thank yous to the panelists as well. So kudos, cheers. Until next time, everybody. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Bye, Lanson. Thank you, Roger. Michael.
Thank you, Jason.